Welcome to Screen Bytes, a podcast about technology, games, TV, and movies. In this episode, we're discussing the first season of Severance. Please expect major spoilers for the first season.
Josh, I wanted to talk about Severance, the Apple TV show. So originally, you know that we've had discussions where I've been getting Apple Plus for free because they've just been giving it away for like 3 months here, 3 months there, get a month free here. And I couldn't really find anything worth actually watching. And you was
even
like,
though I sent you a list of about 6 or 7 different TV shows, and not once did you actually watch
exactly.
them.
But, okay, I have watched Presumed Innocent, which was good, but it's based off a book, and there was a film that came out years and years ago that was... so I already knew the twist for that, but I watched it anyway. That was a good series. But yes, this series, it was completely like... Watching the first episode, I was like, is this something I'm actually going to like? Or is this just something weird? And I kind of got put off from it, like the first episode, because I was like, this is just so strange. I don't really understand what is going on. So we find ourselves with this new employee, and she's in a room, and someone's talking to her on a speaker, and he's basically asking her questions, and he's like, oh, okay, how would you respond to this if I said this? And it's like, what's going on? Like, and then we find out that she's volunteered to have her body or have her brain have installed a chip inside her brain, in which there will be two, like, so there's like two people. So there's one that goes to work, and then there's a person who's actually, once they finish work, that's a totally different person. So it's kind of strange.
Yeah, you got the original. So the original person lives on the outside, and then they send this other persona into work, and neither of them have any idea about the other than what the company might pass through messages or whatever. Super heavily restricted. No real info is shared. Like I think in one episode, the guy hits his head, and he has a small bump or something, and they just come up with something. They make something up, I think, as to how he hurt himself during the workday, and then give him half a day's leave or something. So they really don't, the company really doesn't share what goes on inside with the original outside person, or vice versa. The people inside the company have no idea what happens outside their workplace.
Yeah, for some reason that took me a while to actually like dig into my head, like what's going on here? Because you see him, like, he's gone back home, and then you're like, you see Mark, he's the main person, and he's become like the new team lead because there's someone in the team that left or has retired supposedly, and it's like they don't know what happened to that guy. He just disappeared one day, and they didn't really talk about it afterwards. They were just like, yeah, he's gone.
Yeah, all very hush-hush, not allowed to talk about it.
And yeah, for me at first I was like, what is going on? Like, I don't really understand. But after like 2 or 3 episodes, it started to click with me, especially when because Haley, so she's this new employee, and she's learning...
Haley.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Haley. So she's learning the job as it is, and learning what she needs to be doing, and
yes, and
then she learns all that, and then she's like, you know what? I'm not really enjoying this at all. I think I'm just gonna quit, and I just think I'm gonna leave. And then she tries to leave, and I'm like, well, you can't really do that. Like, it's impossible. You can't just get up, and if you leave, you just come back. And then it's like if you hide anything in the lift when trying to leave as well, like try and
gets picked up and flagged. Did you, the scene with Mark where she was going through the fire door? Did you get what was going on originally, or did you not? Were you still not quite understanding what was going on at that point?
Why was she coming back? And
exactly, yeah, me too, 100%. I think it wasn't until like episode 2 or 3 that we start to really see what was going on, and I think I'd forgotten about that scene for a little while, until maybe I watched a YouTube video or something like that about it, and it's like, oh right, because I remember I had thought about that scene like after the TV show, and I really thought about it a lot, and I was like, what on earth is going on? Like, why does this door have two sides? Like, I was thinking, I wasn't thinking very cleverly about it. The show was showing me that she walks through the door, and on the other side of the door is Mark, because that's from the innie's perspective. She would walk through that door, and as soon as she walks through the door, she's her outside self. So the innie version doesn't remember it. The outside self decides to walk back through the door, so she snaps back into the innie mode. So from her perspective, she's walked through the door, and on the other side of the door is Mark. So I certainly didn't notice that during that episode or during that scene, and it was maybe a couple of episodes later, or maybe through a YouTube recap or something like that, that I kind of realised what had actually gone on in that scene. So yeah. But I think that was purposeful. You know, I think they had chosen to, like, they very slowly and deliberately drop clues for things that are about to give you more information. But the show keeps all of its secrets guarded very closely. And even at the end of season 1, it doesn't feel like any questions have been answered, really.
There is some issues though, like I've with it,
that,
well,
sure,
in terms of like,
go ahead.
like you say, like unraveling or revealing certain elements of the place and what they have the ability to do. Like in the example where Dylan with the beard, he basically
from Fallout.
Is he from Fallout?
Yeah, he was in Fallout.
Oh yeah,
Do you remember him? He was one of the overseers.
Yeah. That's right. I thought I recognised the face, but he stole something from Christopher Walken's. Remember, that's another thing. Like, so there's like different departments, but they're not allowed to interact, and they were like, oh,
yes,
maybe
no, but they can accidentally bump into each other,
which is weird. It's like
it. So it's like the company has created this environment where they're not supposed to talk to each other, yet they're not physically separated from each other. So it's
not until later on when
it's just very strange.
It's like they stop doing their work and like, let's just go and explore the whole place and sod it, and then they come across this other group of people. But then the reason why they haven't explored and gone seeing other groups is because there's some sort of like theory or rumor or something took place where there was like a big fight and they were scaremongering.
Yeah, basically the macrodata department, they've been told that the other group who are like in charge of the arts and the objects and everything like that, they were told that the other department came and they ate someone from their department, like this very like eldritch horror-esque stories that just are absurd. But then it turns out that the other department has been told the exact same story, but from the opposite way around. So they've basically been
manipulated,
like propaganda to be against each other. Yeah, manipulated to be really super distrustful and not like each other. And then there's that weird. We're not really going through the series episode by episode because it's all out and we've seen it all, but. And then there was obviously that one episode where there was the guy just feeding some goats randomly.
Yeah.
There's no context behind it. I think it's a scene that lasts about 30 seconds. They walk in the room, see a guy feeding some goats. He shouts at them. They leave. What the goat was that?
I think they did mention it though. They mentioned something like later on at a party. Like that's the reason for the goats or something. Yeah, it's like produce some of the food maybe.
Oh, do they? I just want to say Jen and I watched this like 2 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, it came out in 2022, so I'm a bit. But the thing is, it's taken a long. Season 2 is supposedly coming out early next year.
Season 2 almost didn't exist. There was I don't know exactly what. There's only rumours at the moment, but apparently there was a lot of issues with someone or some people on the cast or some people on the crew or someone on the writing staff, whatever. But basically, season 2 almost didn't happen I also wonder if that Zach being in Fallout might have delayed filming once they did get things resolved. But yes, season 2 has been very long coming for those of us who watched it when it first came out, especially given, the end of season 1 ends on such a cliffhanger. But yeah.
Yes, it definitely does. I was like, oh no, that's it. Oh, but back to my point about Dylan. So Dylan, he basically steals something from the other apartment. I forgot his name. The one who's like in charge of the office.
Seth, the one who works for the big company outside. He comes in, takes pictures and everything.
Is that his name? Seth?
Yeah.
I thought it was Milchick. Milchick.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Seth Milchick.
Yeah, that's the guy.
Yeah, like Mark Scout.
But they call him Milchick though in the show, if I remember. Well, that's what springs to my mind is like Milchick, go Milchick, you idiot.
I'm just looking at IMDb. Like I said, I watched it 2 years ago.
Ah, okay, yeah, fair enough. So, yeah, that guy, he was proper good. Like, you can definitely tell, like, he's one of those people. You must see this kind of guy, like, just be a complete. He's not an arsehole. He's just doing his job, and he's
very
doing his job very well.
Like I said before, he's very manipulative.
Yeah.
Very manipulative. Particularly the scene where Helly has to go in and apologize 1,000 times. He's pretty scary
he just
in that.
And he's like, no, you're not telling the truth. Say it again. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is there's a part where Dylan steals something and Miltrick is like goes into his outer person of Dylan and speaks to him in the closet.
Yes.
And you're like, wait a minute, wait a minute. Why would you do that? Like, why would Milchick do that? Yes, he stole something, but is it that important to expose that you have the ability to contact, like you can awaken the innie to become the outie, and that's how the whole story starts evolving. You're like, he could have just waited the next day and just pulled him to the side and said, look, I know you stole something. Where is it?
I think the whole point was to scare him and to shock him.
Yeah.
Because basically, if you think about how their lives work, so this guy, Dylan, he's gone to the elevator at the end of his work day. He's gone into the elevator, and then his body goes up, and during the night turns into his outer self. But from his perspective, he actually just emerges straight away the next morning.
Yeah.
And what's happened today is that he's gone into the elevator, and instead of waking up back in the morning inside the elevator for a new workday, he's emerged in
the closet.
In the closet. So he's like in a completely unfamiliar environment
because he's like whoa.
With a familiar face, but he's been sat down, and Milchick is kind of like over him. So it's a very intimidating sort of like positioning, like body language and everything. So he's confused, he's vulnerable. It's just a scare tactic to try and extract information, which wouldn't work if you pulled him aside. Like I think Dylan can be a very stubborn person. Yeah. But like you said, like it's one of about 2 or 3 different things that basically they are the catalyst that kind of starts to unwind everything at the end. So it's not the only thing, but it's one of about 2 or 3 different things that happened.
Yeah. And I suppose that like leads on to like when they manage to escape and become themselves outside. And it's like Mark is talking to is it Harmony? And Harmony is the boss lady, and then he's like, oh, he basically is like, he just assumes that her name would be like Mrs. Cobell or the same.
Oh, this is at the party, yeah, but, the book reading,
and
so she has a different name outside of the workplace, and a workplace name, and the innie basically outs himself because he calls her the innie.
Yeah, that's right.
It's worth bearing in mind that at this point she doesn't work for Blumen.
She gets fired.
Blumen.
Yeah,
she's been fired for not informing the company of the apparent suicide. No, not the attempted suicide of Helly, which there's a bigger reason behind that. So she's been fired, and she notices that he calls her. Was it
Mrs. Cobell?
Mrs. Cobell, and she's like, "Oh, there is something is underfoot, and I now know it's going to happen." So she's going to try and use this as her way back into the company. Because the thing, I mean, let's talk about the company for a second, because like we have no idea what the company does. Like we don't know if they're military, we don't know if they're just standard corporate or whatever. We have no idea what they do. The work that these people are doing is very abstract. They're just clicking on numbers on a screen that makes them feel emotions, and they put scary numbers in one box, happy emotions in another, and medium emotions in a third. Like, it's very... They're not doing real work, but they're doing something which obviously has an effect somewhere. Maybe this is like the equivalent of capture training, but for this TV show. It's just big data.
Well, according to, I think it's Tom, he's actually killing people, actually hurting people by doing what they're
Possibly, but I think that's a rumor or a conspiracy. It's not, but it isn't actually known. No one knows what the company's doing at this stage. And the company, I mean, it is a bit different for us, but it's got very sort of American Pilgrim, American Amish. It's got a very certain feeling, like they've basically built their own sort of scripture book, which gets quoted in pretty much every episode by the more fanatical workers. So the older guy, Bert, played by Christopher Walken or Wallen or whatever his name is.
Yeah,
those two right. They're very into the ethos or cult or religious aspects of this company and what they know the scripture very well. The names of the people the founders. I mean, at one point they go for a tour and they go into like this replica house, and there's statues of all the CEOs going back the last sort of like 200 years or something, right back to the founder. So, some people think, oh, this is a nice museum piece. Helly's thinking, this is awful, what we're doing here. And then there's what's his name?
Which one? Irving?
Yeah, Irving. And he's like, oh, this is like, being in a church or a synagogue or something. This is like sacred ground almost.
He's quite interesting, Irving. Because he's not, sometimes he's against the company. Sometimes he has a bit of that scaredness where he's like, oh, we should report this to such and such. Or I should have done this. Why didn't I report this? I'm so sorry.
I think it might come from the same place where he is a super advocate for the company, but wonders if some of the things that the modern company are doing are going against what the company is supposed to stand for, potentially. There might be something like that. He thinks the company is like straying from what it's supposed to be doing. It's like, it's like when you're told that everything is good and wonderful and awesome, and then suddenly you get like times of turbulence, and instead of going to the company that's supposed to be like everything is good and happy, and instead you get some like coldness and resistance, and he's like, wait, it's like he's not turning into a disbeliever. He's thinking that potentially maybe the people managing it at the moment are straying from the path of the original leader as such, potentially, and that might be giving him some doubts or reason to play along with the rest of the guys who are trying to look for ways to escape, or just to see if there's anything going on or whatever.
I found it also Haley, her outie was, so basically the innie tried to commit suicide, and then the outie sent a message saying, if you ever do that again, I will make sure that your life will be miserable. And at that point I was like, wow, you're stuffed now. Yeah. You're stuck there for life now doing that.
I mean, her outie is incredibly confident, incredibly sort of, there is an air about her which isn't surprising when the revelation in the final episode comes to be.
So she's basically the daughter of the chairman of the company.
And basically what's happened is we've joined the company at the time where she has gone into the program as a propaganda / marketing opportunity. And the guy, Milchek, he's in there with his camera taking all these pictures, and there's some scenes where all of those pictures, we can see them up on stands to set. I'm wondering what they're doing. Like, are they... I mean, potentially, I wonder if the work that the guys are doing is completely fruitless, because they're picking random numbers. you've got these guys who were doing art stuff and 3D printing, and then you've got this guy who's doing stuff with goats, and none of like how is that related? It's not related at all. But you've got three different fields, very different. Like one is a very standard office, mundane work. The other is clean room, slightly scientific, slightly creative, and then the third is like farm, hands-on, that kind of stuff. So I wonder if actually what this company is selling is the Severance system. So they don't, the numbers that they're doing, they're not cracking some military code, they're not killing whales in the sea or killer eels or whatever Dylan thinks they're up to. They're actually doing nothing. They're doing no work at all, but they are pretending to work so that they are demo devices essentially for the Severance program that Blumen would send, that they would sell to other companies around the world. That's what this event at the end of the season 1 seems to be. It's look, here is the outie version of the Severance program, and look how well adjusted she is because she doesn't have to deal with all this that you have to deal with at work. She's not stressed at all, and she's got all this time to spend on herself or whatever. So yeah, I've just it could be, might not be.
Yeah, that's exactly that, because she's basically, they're like, well, the chairman's daughter's gone in, and you can see that her innie is so happy with all those nice smiling photos, and then the outie. But what I wonder is but they've created the innie by putting the chip inside the brain. So technically, in the first instance, the innie never existed. So the way you look at it is like, well, I gave you life, and your life is just the work. Just be happy that you got life, I suppose. But in a way,
they show this in that first interview scene with Helly when she first wakes up, because he says, "What's your name?" And she's like, I don't know. And he asks her some other questions that she can answer. And then he goes back, say, "What's your name?" And she's like, I don't know. Like she has no recollection of her previous life. She can talk. She knows she speaks English, but she doesn't know what her name is. And I can't remember, does she pick a name, or do they tell her what her name is, or does she remember what her name is?
Wasn't there like a video of her outie explaining what...
Oh, introducing her to herself.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, it's basically, she has woken up. Basically, she is a 1-day-old baby with no knowledge except for all the basic functions. Like, she knows how to walk and talk and go to the toilet. So all of that has happened, but she has no life. She has no hobbies. She has no interest. She has no romantic partner. She knows nothing except what has happened to her for the last 20 minutes since she woke up. And all the information she knows is taken from the people, is what they've given her. So it's quite a... And I think that's why you say, episode 1 was confusing. And I think that is meant to be confusing. You're supposed to feel how she's feeling on that day. So it's not supposed to be all the answers are kind of given to her. It's supposed to be disorientating for the viewer just as much as it was for Helly when she landed on that table.
My only question is, what do you think in terms of them trying to expose or trying to gain the advantage of trying to tell people they're actually living a horrible life and they want to get out? Because we have Mark, who managed to tell his sister, and his sister believed him. And then we have Haley, who she'd done a speech, but are those people actually going to care what she's actually saying? Are they going?
And this is the thing, because actually, you don't have to care, because...
Well, are they going to report on what she says? Because sometimes these people turn up to events and they're suckered up to the people that...
Yeah, but these are all the big fancy people who actually don't care about the... This isn't this might not be an event that's going on paper. This is just a rich people event where they're just all drinking champagne. And,
exactly.
And that's things if this is Blumen and some offshore oil company who's trying to bring it in so that they... Because basically this whole thing, essentially, it allows you to torture the innies, and you are exploiting their basic human rights by forcing them to work continuously. The innies, from their perspective, they never get a break from work.
But they do.
They are just working 24/7 from their perspective.
But they do feel fresh. Once they come in from the lift, they feel...
They do feel fresh, and
they only feel
but the thing
fresh
is,
from what the outie is doing as well. So I suppose if the outie...
Yeah, so if the outie has been awake for the 16 hours that they're not awake, then I think there is one time where he wakes up one morning, he's like, oh, I feel awful. And I think that's the time that the guy who left, who quit unexpectedly, he turned up at the outie Mark's house overnight.
Yes.
And slept in his basement. So Mark was very anxious and everything at what was going on. I think he went out, he drove somewhere as well. And then the guy died, I think. And he saw all of that. So when he went to bed and then went to work, he was very tired and everything. So the guy woke up and he's like, oh, I feel awful, or something like that. So, but going back to like what the other, like the message will go out, but the ears that it falls on, it might fall on deaf ears.
Well,
I feel like the people at the corporate party where there is like hundreds of people there, none of those people are going to really care. But where Mark is with the book company, the book reading, so he shared the main details with his sister, and she believes him. And then right before he went back to the outie, he shouted, "She's alive," referring to his wife.
Yeah.
Who he thought died in a car accident. Yeah.
It's Miss Casey.
Yep. And she is, and we've met her, like, she's the person who comes out. They have this like relaxation room. So if they're starting to play up a bit,
yeah,
they get sent to this relaxation room, and she is the person who's the relaxation person. There's obviously some story there as to why her outie was killed, but her innie still exists.
Oh, she gets killed in a car accident.
Supposedly she gets killed in a car accident. Whether she actually died is another thing. But maybe her outie...
According to Mark, that's what happened as well.
But that's what I mean. According to Mark, that's what happened. But he doesn't necessarily know what actually happened. It might have been a staged accident because her outie found out information maybe about PT. So potentially, I mean, so maybe PT, who was... in his innie and his outies, they were kind of converging. So like he was building a map of everything inside. Maybe he was inside and outside at one point. So maybe he found her outie after he became... Oh no, because it happened all very similar. Like she died years ago and he left days ago. Yeah, yeah.
The thing is, Irvin, he also found a map. Maybe on his outie.
That's his outie, yeah. So that's the funny thing. So going back to Irving, who is his innie is he's like a devout Lumen devotee. His outie is completely the opposite. So his innie is like very trim and proper, wears a suit and everything. His outie is an artist who doesn't dress very well. He's very sort of loose. And it turns out he's got a stash of stuff that he's been working on. I did hear one theory. He might be the person who put PT back together, who unseveranced him. So it'll be interesting to see if he has anything to do with PT in season when we get to season 2. But he went off to find Bert's outie. They were all supposed to be getting the message out, but instead he does something quite selfish and goes and finds Bert, who's on the other side of town.
That was the weird thing too, because he seemed to think that getting retired actually meant his death. And then when he managed to get out, he tracked Bert down, but didn't manage to actually talk to him. But it seemed like
he didn't think he was dying. Like he knew.
Well, no, they thought they were going to kill him. That was his death, like the retirement. So he's gonna get killed. You're gonna kill him. That would be his retirement, and that doesn't really make too much sense because if you've got your...
So when they retire him, the innie does effectively die, but the outie doesn't die. They're not going to go and kill the outie. They don't need to.
No, exactly, exactly. So he's like
the innie just ceases to exist, and that is the person he's referring to as dying.
But it seemed like when they were discussing that, there was like some sort of miscommunication about that because Irvin was saying, "Oh, you're going to kill him," and he was like, and then Bert was like, "Oh," and then the Milchek stepped in and said, "Oh, can you stop being so hostile?" I was thinking, is he going to die then?
But from the innie's perspective, it is effectively the same thing.
Yeah,
he's never going to see the innie again. The innie is going to cease to exist and not remember him. But the outie is going to go on and actually retire. That's the whole point of this program, is that people get to have their work lives and their personal lives completely separate. And then whatever the innie or the outie does, the other doesn't. They're not responsible for their actions.
And that's strange why Erlen decided to go to Bert when he knows that Bert won't even know who he is.
It's emotions, though, isn't it? Like, they've started to have a sort of like a little romantic fling just before Bert is forced to retire. So he goes to him in the outie world because he thinks he can kind of like get him to remember him or something like that. It's just he's not
thinking straight.
He's not like thinking straight. He's just being quite, being emotional or acting on emotions.
In a way, how are they going to get the innie out anyway? Say someone good turns up and says, "Oh no, what you're doing is wrong. You can't do this. We need to actually give rights to these people." How can they get the innie?
Well, yeah, I mean,
out without killing the outie?
Yeah, because you've essentially got two souls living within the same body. I mean,
unless you just say, well, you don't have to work, you have your own little life, you do what you want, you can leave. So you have to maybe you have so many hours and that person has so many hours.
Yeah, I mean, you can totally do that. I think reintegration is a word that is said across the series, so maybe there is I think what they were trying to do with Petey is merge the two personas together, but that eventually kills him. But that's not a problem that that Blumen who make the technology, they've not come up with a solution for that, because they're like, the outie won't care about the innie. They'll just live their life until they retire, and then they will retire, and the innie will just cease to exist.
See, there's a lot of discussion. It's only 12 episodes or so, and it's.
But this is the thing. So it's like,
it's really
what's going on inside what's going on the rest of the world? Is this like a dystopian future? Is this something that could be happening in a world that's basically the same as ours is now? We see at one point that when his sister gives birth, there's a woman there who is the wife of a senator, and she's using Severance program not to go to work and to go home from work, but so she doesn't have to go through the pain of pregnancy. So she went into Severance. She has her innie, who only existed for the 9 months she was pregnant, and she basically appeared after childbirth and took over the body again at the end once the child was out and she was all healed. Did you pick up on that one, or?
No, that flew me one by.
Okay, do you know the woman I'm talking about?
Is it Nora?
I don't know the name.
She's
but
mixed
his sis. So his sister goes to this place to give birth.
Yeah.
And she meets another woman. She goes outside and she meets another woman in one of those cottages. And the woman she meets is very scared because she's only existed for 9 months. She has no worldly knowledge. But they meet and they talk and, be pregnant mothers together. When they both give birth, she meets her again outside and she taps her on the shoulder and says, "Hi, nice to see you. We're off now. Goodbye." And the lady turns around. She's like, "I have no idea who you are." And it's because it's her outie, not her innie, and it was her innie who she met during the night. So that's another selling point of the Severance program. I imagine military people might use it for preventing PTSD. You send the innie to war and send the outie home.
How can that work? That can't work, because you can't just. That's not going to work for army, because they could be based somewhere else in a different country, and then how are they going to get to their actual proper home? They would have
No. They would spend the whole 9 months as the innie, because with the pregnant lady,
I see what you mean.
She would eat. Yeah, she would eat and sleep as the innie. So the innies can be in charge of the body's needs. And it's basically the same thing. Like, if you're in the army, when you're deployed on the plane over, you turn into the innie. And then when you go home, providing you survive, you turn into the outie.
And then you
the elevator would be.
Yeah, and you don't get that stress, and you don't get the traumatic experiences of war. So,
I mean, you can see the selling points. You can see how this could sell.
Yeah, but it's like creating life and then getting rid of life.
It is.
Yeah, I also think the same as you, what we were saying earlier about, do we think that it's actually made a difference on the last episode of trying to contact people? I think maybe, I was thinking while you was talking about Mark, I was thinking maybe because Mark's brother-in-law is a writer, so maybe he could write a book, and maybe try and expose it that way. So if his sister tells his husband that my brother's innie is, or maybe she just doesn't care. She's like, if you think about it, it's like they did tell him not to do it. It wasn't a good idea. Now they've got this.
No, I think she cares very much. I think they both care very deeply for him, and they know why he did it. He did it because he's depressed about losing his wife.
Yeah, but that was his outie. But not what about his innie? Like they got this new stress, like this thing about this innie.
But at the same time, his outie has started to uncover it as well.
That's true.
So he's not completely out of the loop. So when he wakes up and everyone says who's alive, and he's going to be like, who? And then he will actually start to piece it together. Whereas if the outie knew nothing, had never met PT, he would be completely innocent. Whereas actually he has been snooping around a little bit, so he's not. He will actually. I think he will know something's going on the inside, and that might spur him go further. But the big question is like at the end of season 2, he and potentially all of them are going to have they're going to have to make a choice. Do they live as the innie or the outie? Because I suspect what's going to happen is they're going to try and destroy the program in some way. However,
it depends.
That's going to be.
It depends on the whoever, because like
Well,
Ivan, you probably want to say the innie is living a better life than the outie.
Well, but that's what I mean. It's like both sides of all of the characters have things to lose, well, the outies have things to lose. The innies have a lot of desperation to get out. There might be some decisions that have to be made, and I think they might try to like reintegrate, and I think that might fail, and like maybe one of them might die from trying to do that, and then they're like, oh, we have to actually choose to be one or the other, or something like that. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I don't know. Is there anything much else to talk about? I mean, there is that weird sex dance thing that the guy that Dylan got to watch, the waffle.
Oh yeah, that
party.
was a bit weird. I was like, the whole show has been like quite normal in that sense. Like, there's nothing been.
No,
like,
it
really,
hasn't. It
well,
really
you know what I mean?
hasn't.
Like, yeah, but
I will be honest.
Nothing sexual. There's nothing like been like really weird sexually.
No.
And then like I'm watching it, and then my partner starts watching it with me, and she's like, "What are you watching?"
That was the wrong time to
man,
turn up.
Like, I was like, wrong time to watch, but I was like,
the whole series, the company, is it Bloomin' or Lumen? The big company. It is incredibly strange, and I don't know if eldritch is the right word, but it's actually quite, in some ways it's difficult to relate to it because it's got this very 1800s American vibe going for it, like Midwestern sort of thing, pilgrims. There's something there which has been brought through, which obviously, like, we don't have any of that here. I've only seen it in TV and games and movies and that. So I kind of get what they're going for, but it just doesn't strike a chord with me in the same ways as it might do people from America. But there has been a thread the entire way, and then it's just been blown to massive proportions for this final scene. But then I was thinking, right, all these weird dancers and people doing the orgy, where did they come from? What have they been up to the rest of the time?
Maybe it's the department. There's another department.
Well, there's one department of goat dancers or whatever.
Dancers.
Maybe.
Yeah, some holes appearing, mate. I don't know.